Welcome to Rider Forge. This is Dr. Will speaking. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. If you want to help support what I'm doing, consider picking up a slick Rider Forge t-shirt or sticker. The link is in the description. In this video, we're going to take a relaxed look at the basic parts and functions on and around the front end of the motorcycle. I'll explain what things are called, the basics of how they work, and I'll provide some tips to help get you feeling comfortable with this part of your bike. Stick around. Let's just start identifying parts. We know that this is a tire. This metal part inside the tire is actually the rim. You can refer to the entire thing, the tire and the rim, as a wheel. The braking system is composed of the caliper, which I'm circling here, and then the disc, or the rotor. This outer part of the rotor is what comes in contact with the brake caliper and the brake pads. You can tell by these characteristic little squares that are cut out of here that this is an ABS brake setup. This long cable coming in right here, that's brake fluid that comes down from the brake lever, goes into the caliper, and it squeezes the pistons in the caliper, which squeezes the brake pads, which then squeezes the rotors. Now this is just a fender. What does this do? It just protects you and the engine of the motorcycle from rocks, debris, dirt. This is the fork. This is your front suspension. This is all filled with oil. Now this old school style bike, but also some dirt style bikes, have what's called a gator. This just protects the transition between the upper part of the fork and the lower part of the fork. There's what's called a fork seal in there. It keeps the oil in, but allows the top part of the fork to go inside the bottom part of the fork. Basically, your suspension just absorbs bumps and it keeps the tire pressed against the pavement. So this entire thing is going to go up and down in accordance with the surface of the road. What we're going to talk about is your minimum responsibility as a motorcycle rider. These are things that you have to do. You absolutely have to do. And then on the right-hand side, we're talking about jobs that a dealer or mechanic can handle. You can take on some of these jobs yourself if you want, or if you're ambitious or you're mechanically inclined, but that's optional. And I highlight in bold things here that you have to do that require some sort of active effort. The other items on this list are passive. They just are things you need to be watching for. You need to be looking out for them. These are things you're just observing. So let's go over back to the next slide here. So for the tire, what you're looking at is tire tread. You're looking at the depth of the tire tread. Now we can see in this example picture, there's this little bump here, and this is the tire tread depth. When the surface of this tire, this chunk of rubber really, is equal to the depth of this bump, that means that your tires need to be replaced. The next thing that we want to look for on a tire, just to be aware of it, is the size of the tire and the speed rating of the tire. We're just going to circle it. You don't have to worry about all this vocabulary down at the bottom. The minimum that you need to know is to be able to identify these numbers on the side of your tire and just be aware of what they mean. And that way you can buy a replacement tire if you ever need to. They're right there. The next thing we really need to be aware of is this date stamp. Now every tire, including car tires, but also motorcycle tires, they have this date stamp that tells us how old the tire is. This is critically important because tires on motorcycles are much more important than tires on cars. I'm not saying tires on cars aren't important, but they are so much more important on motorcycles because you only have 2 wheels, you don't have 4, okay? Now if we cut this number in half, and sometimes there's more digits, but it'll always have this 4-digit section. This on the right, this is the year, the 2-digit year. So this is 2016. This is the week. So the 38th week of the year 2016. So if we were to look at the current date, we'd say, okay, that's about a 4-year-old tire. About 4 years is the maximum that I would ever run a tire on a motorcycle. And the reason why is because they get hard over time and they lose grip. It does not matter if they look absolutely perfect. They do not have to have cracks in them. You're going to especially see this in adverse weather conditions like rain. You're going to lose grip, and that's going to put you at risk. So when you're buying a motorcycle, if you're looking at something used, you're going to have to look at this date. You're going to buy a low miles bike with, maybe there's 1,000 miles on the motorcycle. The tires look brand new, but they're 7 years old. Replace them. It's part of the deal. Try to negotiate it into the deal. It's going to be really hard to do because most people just don't understand the importance of a tire being new. They think that the tread depth and the lack of cracks is all that matters, but that is absolutely wrong. Please don't run really old tires. My date of about 4 years, you can debate that if you want, but that's what I'm comfortable with. All right, the last thing you need to know about tires is tire pressure. So basically you're going to look at the sticker And this sticker is on the back of the motorcycle. I'll show you in a second, but you can read it. It says front and rear, and then you're going to be looking at the PSI column, because in the United States that's what we read, and you have solo and you have dual. So if you have a passenger, where it would be is right here on the back of the motorcycle. They always stick it right there. It looks ugly. You can see they took it off here, and there's nothing. There's normally an auxiliary sticker on the gas tank too, but they removed these for the promotional sticker, but that's where it would be. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is the front brakes and the brake pads specifically. This is what you would be responsible for. And again, we're just talking about observing here. You don't need to learn how to change your own brakes, but you have to be able to look at them and tell when they're worn out. How do you do this? You just grab a flashlight and you look at the brakes from the side. The rotor is going to be taking up all that room, so you're not going to be able to see down the middle here. But you can see right here these little gaps. The workable tread depth of this, with the working depth of your brake pads is this area here. So basically when this gets chewed down and these grooves are no longer visible, or they're starting to get really small, that means your brake pad is done. It's time to replace it. The other thing that people do with brake pads is they actually insert a little metal pin inside the brake pad. There's little pieces of metal pins, so that when the tread of the brake pad gets down to a certain depth, that metal pin will start making contact with the rotor, and it's going to start to squeak. So when you start to hear that squealing and squeaking, that may also mean it's time to change your brake pads. So let me go back here and talk about one more thing. So there's not really much you're going to do with the forks as far as maintenance goes. Really what you're looking for is, the forks are filled with oil. We talked about that already. But if they start leaking oil, and that's what happens eventually, all forks, when they wear out, when the fork seals wear out, they're going to start leaking oil. That oil is going to start dripping down the fork. When that happens, it might be visible, so you're going to be looking for oil dripping down the fork. But if it gets really far down, like down here, it's going to get onto your rotors. It's going to get onto your brakes. That fork oil on your brakes is going to ruin your brake pads. Once it gets onto the rotor, those brake pads are done. They have to be replaced. That's because this oil that gets on the rotor is going to get in the brake pad material, and you can never get it out. You will permanently ruin the brake pads. So if you see oil dripping down the fork and it's gotten down to the brakes, you have to replace the brake pads. It sucks. You can wish that you had caught it before it got all the way down there, but once those rotors are contaminated with oil, the brake pads are done. Don't run them anymore, just replace them. It's really important not to have oil contaminated on here. You know, obviously your brakes are not going to grip very well, but I think it's less obvious that even if you wiped it off and cleaned it off really well, you have permanently damaged those brake pads. You cannot use them anymore. Again, to reiterate, the regular maintenance jobs, you can take this to a shop, you can take it to a mechanic, whoever you want to do, but the minimum responsibility that you have as a rider is going to be checking that tire pressure. How often should you check it? Every time you ride. Check the tire pressure every time you ride. You should be observing these other things here every so often. I would check them frequently. It really doesn't take that long to look at the tire condition and just say, hey, is there a nail in it? Does it look flat? Does it look damaged? Does it look cracked? Do the wheels, do the spokes, are the spokes loose? If you have spokes, if you don't have spokes, are there any cracks or bends in the wheel? Are the forks leaking? Is there any sort of issue there? So it's really just kind of watching and looking. You're not really doing a whole lot actively. But this tire pressure, don't let it go. Your tires are really important, and the motorcycle will actually start to handle really poorly if your tires are overinflated or underinflated. And don't listen to these crazy people trying to get more gas mileage out of their motorcycle by overinflating their tires. Don't do it. It is not worth the risk. Your bike will handle like a pile of turds if you put too much air in the tire. It is not worth your life in order to save 3 mpg in a vehicle that already gets superb gas mileage. And with that, we will end this video. Please take a look at the entire beginner playlist if you'd like to learn more. The best way to stay informed and find out when I release new videos is by subscribing and hitting the bell notification. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to help support what I'm doing, consider picking up some merch. I really appreciate it and the feedback. Do you have a specific question or request? Let me know about it in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer it. You never know, I might even make a video on it. Until next time, this is Dr. Will with Rider Forge. I'm out of here.